Good morning. The Urantia book teaches this, that the universe is one vast school. Wow! What a great school! I love this campus. You know, I can't wait to be a part of this school. But wait a minute, I already am a part of this school. Yeah, it says we're going to be students in this school for forever, really, I guess, you know? This is what we do. And I'm so excited about this career of learning. What we often forget, though, is that we're not only students in this school, we are also the faculty of this school. We are the teachers. In fact, at every step that we take through this universe, we learn something, and we're not considered that we really know it yet until we turn around and teach it to somebody else. And this is a really great design. And it's a great design because when you have just learned something, you are full of the enthusiasm of learning this and mastering it. You're full of the excitement of what this new kind of knowledge or skill gives you and how it has changed your life. And perhaps this is the most important thing, you remember what it was like not to know. And you remember what it took to learn something. And so you are close enough to still being a student that you can commiserate with having to learn something and the work that it's going to take to do it. And so it's a great design, and we just have to get used to it, that we're going to be doing this, learning and teaching as we go along. You might think, though, that, okay, I have this universe career of teaching, but you know what? I'm here on Urantia right now, and I can put that off. I'm not really that excited about, I just want to learn. Please don't make me have to be a teacher, too. You know, it's kind of scary to be a teacher. But the fact of the matter is, well, we also think, too, that, you know, this is the only world we can use time as a way to avoid something, right? So, hey, it's the only chance we have. Let's do it. Okay, but, you know, you can learn so much here to teach. And not only that, you are already teaching. You might not be in a formal career of teaching, but you teach people every day. If you're a parent, we know that you do a lot of teaching and how important that is. But as an uncle or an aunt or a sister or a brother, a coworker or a friend, we're always teaching other people things. And so the purpose of my talk here today is to show you how Jesus taught and some things that we can learn from the way he taught. And it's not going to turn you into an expert today by any means. We have a whole universe career of that. But we can become more mindful of what we're doing and recognize our teaching opportunities and practice our teaching skills. One of the things I think that sometimes gets in our way of wanting to be a teacher in this lifetime is we think that after this lifetime, it's all about spiritual stuff, you know, and there's this big divide between this stuff like teaching kids how to tie their shoes or something like that and teaching spiritual truth. But the fact of the matter is, the next world isn't that much different. We are going to have a lot of different worlds to explore. We have a new form in each world, and we have to learn very practical stuff. The Urantia book tells us that teaching involves practical skills, physical stuff, morantial stuff, and spiritual stuff. So you can teach at any level, on any world. And so it's not this big divide suddenly that we step into a different kind of teaching. In fact, we see that Jesus taught a lot of practical stuff too. He taught his brothers and sisters how to read and write. He taught his brothers carpentry and how to run a household. He taught Ganid a lot of stuff on the way to Rome, and a lot of it was about simply the physical world. He taught the apostles apparently how to fish better. And this is kind of amazing to me. He taught the Zebedees how to build better boats. Woo! I hope that some archaeologist can find a boat that was built by Jesus. That would be great. Yeah. Jesus himself, he didn't go to a teaching school someplace. He learned to teach by taking all the opportunities that he had to teach and practicing in those moments. And you can do it too. There's lots of opportunities to do it. And so I'm going to talk to you about just a few of the things that Jesus used as teaching practices, and that we can use them, learn them, and do them well, and improve our teaching in a more mindful way. Well, the first thing that comes to most people's mind is that Jesus used parables, right? Parables. And there's these great stories, and they have these spiritual truths and things like that. And yeah, it's true, he did. But I would like to broaden that concept and say simply that Jesus used teaching tales. And all humans use teaching tales. We learn by telling stories. Now, we're very much aware that all cultures all over the world teach a lot of things through stories. One of the things we teach through stories is history and values and things like that. We also teach a lot of practical stuff through stories, like teaching a child to tie their shoes. There's a little story about make 2 rabbit ears, and the rabbit goes through the hole and blah, blah, blah. You can learn, you can remember how to tie your shoelaces with that little story. So a little story doesn't have to have a great plot. It just has to have terms and ideas in it that we are already familiar with. And this is important because you can't teach somebody something that is totally disconnected from what they know. You have to connect it in some way by using terms and ideas that they're already familiar with. Scientists do this all the time to explain the concept of electricity, something that we use every day. You can use the story, we could also call it a model, of water in a hose, right? Oh, I know how water in a hose works. Okay, there's pressure and volume and stuff like that. I kind of get it. Physicists explain light by saying light is like a wave, and we see waves on the ocean, and yeah, okay, waves. Then they have to change the story because it's not completely like a wave. It's also like little packets, and now they call them photons, right? But by modeling it on something that we already know, we are helping somebody to understand something greater. Okay, so it's an important thing to do. Don't be afraid to use teaching tales. Last night, Mo told us a teaching tale about Jesus' life. He told us the story of Jesus' life. That's why we all really understand and are drawn to Jesus, because there's a story. Really, the Holy Rancher book is sort of a teaching tale. It explains the universe, which we can't possibly understand at this level totally. It explains it in terms that we know already. So that's a technique that Jesus used, and that don't be afraid to use it. It's used on all different levels. The second thing that Jesus did to help people to learn was he allowed them to learn by doing, right? And this is really an important thing. You let people practice what you're trying to teach them. For instance, Jesus spent a lot of time teaching his brother James how to run a household, and then he said, bye, I'm leaving for 2 years, you run it, okay? He figured that James knew how to do it, but while he was still around and watching over him, he couldn't really make the task his own. This is when we are left alone to do things on our own, we really can internalize what have been learning. So learning by doing. He also did the same thing with training the apostles. He taught them for a while, then he said, bye, I'm going to stay here. You guys go out for a few weeks. Come back and we'll talk about it. And he did that several different times. He also learned himself by doing these things. He taught himself how to teach by teaching others and grabbing every opportunity that he had to teach people. It allows the person to figure it out by themselves, because when somebody teaches you something and they're the expert and then they hover over you while you're trying to practice, it makes you nervous, right? And you feel like I have to do exactly the way they told us, and we don't. We're not all the same people. We're not going to make teaching clones of ourselves. Jesus did not expect that of the apostles. And we shouldn't expect that of each other. So let people learn how to do things by leaving them alone and practicing it on their own. A third thing that Jesus did was to always use a positive approach. Now, he had grown up in a Jewish household, in a Jewish tradition. Well, look at the 10 Commandments. It tells us what not to do, right? Except honor your mother and father. But most of it is what you shouldn't do. And Jesus decided, hey, we should focus on talking about what you're doing right, and then encouraging you to keep doing that and building on it. Now, I was a teacher for actually 32 years, and I started off as a teacher of writing, and 32 years ago, actually it was longer than that, I thought, well, I got to correct all these things in their grammar and stuff, and hand back a paper, and it had all this blood all over it. And my poor students, they're like, did I do anything wrong? It's just so terrible. I finally figured it out that, that's not the way to teach. What you need to do is find out something. Well, you're asking them to write their ideas. Here's an idea that you have that is really cool. Build on that. Tell me more about that. Yeah, and look, here's where you did this sentence just perfect. That's a beautiful sentence. And when you focus on what they did right, then they feel encouraged to keep trying and figuring things out. So Jesus said, don't take things away from people by pointing out what they're wrong. Encourage them to do what they're doing right. When he talked to somebody about their philosophy that was all mixed up, he would say, here's the one thing, this is a great idea. He didn't say, that's the only thing that you really know. He said, yes, this is a great idea. Let's build on it. The fourth thing that Jesus did was he always took a personal approach to people. We often think that a teacher has to be like this. You're really a great person if you can command an audience and speak to millions or whatever. But in truth, teaching, and I've found this so true in my career, the teaching happens between people. It's a human thing that we do. Anything else would be instinct or our chromosomes telling us what to do. But through teaching, we teach other people to be human. And we do that very much on a personal level. And we see Jesus always going and just listening to people, asking them questions, drawing them out, getting them to tell him about themselves. And when he did that, then he could see where they were coming from. He could choose something that was right and use a positive approach and tell them something. I found this is so true in my own teaching career that, I teach classes and I talk for a long time. And I'm not saying that people don't get anything out of that. I hope you're getting something out of this. But it's much more meaningful when a student comes and sits in my office and we have a conversation. And we talk about an idea that we have in class, or his piece of writing, or her idea for a project. And we exchange ideas, and we meet as two human beings. And this is what Jesus was really so good at. When you really look at what the Urantia book tells us, he's not really out there talking to multitudes most of the time. Most of his work was one-on-one, talking to people over here and over there, giving a very personal approach. They didn't even remember him particularly later, but they remembered what he had taught them. And they wondered, that was kind of like that weird preacher from, that I saw 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever it was. And yeah, he gave me that idea. So that's a way to teach people, by that personal approach. The last thing that Jesus taught was that you have to really embody what you teach. If you're trying to teach truth, you have to be true, right? That you don't want to put yourself up as a teacher without being what it is that you're teaching. I know I've had a lot of teachers in my life because I went to school a lot. And some of them, I don't remember anything that they've specifically taught me. You can learn a lot of stuff, even sitting in a classroom, that's not what the teacher's teaching. You know that. And we can learn a lot ourselves just because we're learning machines. So in 5th grade, I'm sure I learned fractions or something in geography and the basics of civics or something like that. But what I remember is that my teacher didn't like me. He was not a nice person. He would persecute me. He would attack me. He would make fun of me. And that's what I learned that year, that teachers are not necessarily nice, and he wasn't, okay? Now, since then, I've had mostly good teachers, I'm happy to say, and I can remember, actually, I don't remember so much what they taught me. Obviously, I learned, but I remember them and who they were and what they taught me about who they were. In my doctoral program, one of my favorite teachers, I had a course with this woman who really thought, to be a college professor, you had to get out there and publish, and you had to look great and talk perfect and everything like that. And I just thought, that's just so not me. If I have to be like you, I learned a lot in that class, but I didn't want to be like her. And I took another class, and the teacher was, you follow your dream, you publish on what you're interested in, you teach, there's not only one way to teach the way you want to do it, wear what you want. You're a college professor, there's not a uniform for that. And so he taught me who he was, and that was the best lesson for me at that time. That's what I needed to want to continue my education. Parker Palmer, this reflects what Parker Palmer talks about, which I guess you had like a pre-conference retreat or something about that. He says, you teach who you are. Yes, you teach who you are. This is a momentous gathering here. I am so happy to be here. I started reading the book in 1992, and when I came into finding other readers, I was a little dismayed that there was sort of this argument going on. All right? Okay. And it went on for a long time, and it caused a lot of heartache for all of us, I'm sure. But you know what? We grow. We get older. This is a young movement. We get wiser. And we're a family. And siblings argue. And siblings say hateful things and beat up on each other sometimes. And then you grow up and you say, hey, I kind of like my brother. He's not such a jerk after all. I was a brat. I was the brat little sister, okay? We forgive each other. And so it's a wonderful thing to be here together. So while we have these few precious days together, let's share some stories and learn about each other that way. Let's do things together. Yeah, and learn through doing things together. Let's use a positive approach and say nice things and talk about the good things that we're doing together. Let's be sure we connect personally, because that's where the real teaching takes place. And finally, let us teach who we are, and let the lesson be love. Let it be love. Peace and joy.